Welcome to the podcast ABCs of Parenting Adult Children. Please join us as we discuss parenting adult children and the unique struggles that it comes along with.
Hello, and thank you for listening to our podcast. Please subscribe and follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Please take the time to leave a review where you listen to podcasts or on our website at parentingadultchildren.org. Our Instagram channel is Parenting Adult Children 125. Video episodes are uploaded at rumble.com and my YouTube channel. Please subscribe and follow those channels for future updates. I release new episodes every Friday at 8 a.m. Thank you for listening, and now to our featured episode. Hello and welcome to ABC's of Parenting Adult Children podcast. My name is James Moffitt and I will be your host. Today we have a special guest, Corie Whiteland. Corie, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks, James. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us today. Do me a favor and introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Yeah, my name is Corie Whiteland, like you just said, James. I am an ADHD coach, executive functioning coach. So I support folks in building executive functions, which are time management, organization, motivation, prioritization, and emotional regulation. So I have a background in education, and I'm also an educational consultant. And I have 3 kids. The oldest one is an adult officially, and the middle one is on her way to soon being an adult. So I'm on both sides right now.
So as long as you survive the teenage years, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we started we have a private Facebook support group for parents. We started it in 2015. We had like 10 members. And at that time, we had 2 teenagers living at the house, and I was desperately trying to stay out of prison.
Yeah.
And so I told my wife, I said, we ought to start a Facebook group and see if there's anybody else that are having these issues. And so now, 10 years later, we have like 1.6 thousand members or 1.3 thousand members.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
So yeah. So apparently, it's a topic or topics that resonate with a lot of parents.
Sure.
And then I started the podcast in 2023, and I thought, hey, let's do a podcast that people can listen to and watch, kind of supplement the Facebook messaging and all that. So parenting can be a challenge, an adventure.
That is for sure. It is
a
new adventure every day, and with every kid it's different. And just when you think you have it figured out, a curveball gets thrown and you got to figure it out all over again.
All right, let me read this little blurb off of your Podmatch profile, and then we can go from there.
Okay.
It says your conversation with Corie could explore the intersection of ADHD and parenting, particularly focusing on how parents of young adults with ADHD can create supportive environments. This episode may delve into the practicalities of managing executive dysfunction in family settings and shed light on personalized strategies for fostering understanding and communications. So, tell me a little bit about your parenting story.
Well, that's a great question. I had I always wanted to be a parent. I knew that. I always wanted to be a parent. And I had my first daughter fairly on the young side in my mid-20s. And my husband and I felt like we were just kind of figuring it out. She had a ton of medical challenges when she was born. And it was a rough start, especially for 2 younger folks. And what we learned through that, though, is that, what really matters. And I've always kind of taken that with me, that what really matters in parenting for me is connection before everything else. So whether it's connection before redirection, connection before conversation, connection before discipline, that my main goal as a parent has always been to be connected to my kids. And then 4 years later, I had another kiddo who came into this world with the biggest personality I've ever seen. And 16 years later, still has that big personality, which is amazing. And when she was younger, we always said, okay, we can use this. She can either use this for good or for evil. And our job as parents is to help her, use it for good. And for the most part, she really has. And then my youngest is 13 and just comes with their own set of unique challenges and unique strengths. And my pediatrician says that she's never had a family that has 3 kids that are as different as my 3 kids. So I take that as a badge of honor because I think that they've really been allowed to be themselves and show up authentically in this world. And that's hard as a parent. It'd be a lot easier they were a little bit more similar, but it's also really fun to see them all kind of thrive in their own.
Right. So there's a lot of transitioning going on with you as a parent, right?
Yes.
While the kids
Yes.
are transitioning, you have to transition right along with them.
For sure. For sure. My
Yeah.
20-year-old is a sophomore in college, and she is about as far away as you can be and still be in the continental United States. And so that's
Oh,
been a big
really?
challenge. Yeah. She's in New York City and I'm in
Oh,
San
wow.
Diego. And just having that piece of our family so far away and having her navigate living in Manhattan, a whole
Oh, wow.
different type of the world. And then also transitioning to being more of, adult to adult with her and allowing her to have the more adult conversations with me, allowing her to make some adult decisions that might not be what I would have made, allow her to kind of figure out life on her own is hard as a parent. It's hard to transition from being that true parent to being more of like, okay, I'm just here if you need me. And that's been an interesting transition for me for sure.
I'll bet. So tell me about how did you get into what's your job title, or what do you call yourself?
Yeah, I'm an ADHD executive functioning coach.
Okay.
So what I do is I work with individuals or groups, and I work with families. I work with college kids, high school kids, young adults, and my oldest client right now is in her 70s. So I have a wide range of ages.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, but what every one of my clients needs is support in building those skills that often are challenged with ADHD. So skills that for people that don't have ADHD develop naturally. When you have ADHD, the parts of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, it's not built the same way as people that don't have ADHD. So we have to actually build those tools and build those strategies externally, like if you think of like an external hard drive, in order to navigate the world in a way that makes sense for the people around us, but also honors the way that our brains think and process. And
So
yeah.
how did you get into that?
Yeah, so I got into this because I myself am neurodiverse and have ADHD. All three of my
Okay.
kids have ADHD, but they all have ADHD in a very different way. And when I was a teacher, I was a teacher of kids that were neurodiverse. And I saw that the kinds of support they needed were just not the same kinds of support that neurotypical kids needed in the classroom. And then I started to notice that the apple doesn't fall from the tree, which we know that biologically. We know that if you have ADHD, you have an 80% chance that your child will also have ADHD.
Mhm.
So I started to notice, okay, I can't just help the kids build these strategies, because then if they go home and the family doesn't have the same kind of support, then it all kind of falls apart. So when I left the classroom, I went back and I got certified in ADHD coaching so that I could support the whole system. And I also noticed that once kids left the house, if their families were being that executive functioning for them, emailing the teacher, making sure their binders were all up to date, making sure that they've checked, all their homework, making sure they get to practice on time, making sure their bags were packed, as parents do, because we love our kids and we want them to succeed. What I noticed then is these kiddos were going out into the real world and they didn't have their toolbox because their tools had been external by other people. Right. And so I started then working with young adults and college kids, and that became something that I really love to do because it's kind of like they're baby deers. They're just figuring it out for the first time. Their legs are a little wobbly.
Right.
And they get to figure out what works for them instead of just saying, okay, this is what my mom said I should do. They get to figure out exactly what works for them particularly and individually. And I think that's a really cool time to build those systems.
So let's do something a little different here. Tell us what it's like to be somebody that's neurodiverse, that has ADHD. What is a typical day like?
Well, for me, I have built a lot of tools. So I use a lot of systems and tools as someone that has ADHD. But some of, my big challenges are time management. So I am very time blind, which means I think something will take 5 minutes when it really will take half an hour. Or I think I've only been on my phone for 10 minutes and I've really been on my phone for an hour. Or I think it'll only take me 20 minutes to drive somewhere, but I forget about walking to the car, getting in the car, parking at the place, walking into the appointment. And so what I've had to do is I've had to build systems such as alarms, adding 50% more time, making sure that if I'm on my phone, that I set a timer on my phone to remind me, hey, you've been on for a while. And I also keep a log of how long things take. So if I am like, oh, I think this project will only take 20 minutes, I can go back and look at a similar project and say, oh, wait, no, it's going to take me an hour. It's not going to take 20 minutes. So I have a lot of extra things that I do. Another thing that I need is people with ADHD, we have really bad working memories. So we have a hard time remembering instructions. We have a hard time remembering what we need to do. I live by lists. I have visual lists and visual reminders everywhere I go. And I have to write, for my brain, I have to write them down. They can't be lists on my phone. They can't be reminders or things on my phone like that. They have to be written lists. So I have to spend time every day making sure that those lists are up to date and making sure that I've planned for those. I also am like most ADHD people, I'm a really highly sensitive person. And so I've also spent a lot of energy on emotional regulation, a lot of on mindset reframe, on building self-compassion. So I also have to build that into my day. So those are just some examples of, someone like me who looks on the outside like I have it all together. I'm really on top of it. It's all of those systems that I've built that help me just be on an even playing field.
Got you. What does ADHD stand for? I know what the first part is. I can't remember the second part.
Yeah, it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So we used to have ADHD, which the hyperactive, and ADD, which was without the hyperactive. But what we know now from more brain research and the ability to really look at what's happening inside the brain is that everybody that has ADHD has some hyperactive component. So people that are diagnosed hyperactive, ADHD hyperactive tendency, they're physically hyperactive. So they move around a lot. They're kind of that classic 6-year-old that can't sit in their seat, that's shaking their leg all the time. And then there's hyperactivity inattentive disorder. And inattentive are the kids that look really daydreamy, look kind of spacey, kind of like disorganized. And what we know about that is that their brains are hyperactive. So their thoughts are hyperactive. They can't control their attention. It's all over the place. And then there's a combination. So there's people that have both. That ADD is no longer something we diagnose. It's an attentive disorder.
I got you. All right. So how can parents understand executive dysfunction's impact on young adults?
Yes. The first thing to remember is that with ADHDers until about the time they're 30 is they are 30% behind in executive functioning maturity than neurotypical people. So if you have an 18-year-old that you're sending off to college that has ADHD, their executive functioning skills are probably about like a 14-year-old. If you have a 25-year-old with ADHD that's living on their own, they're probably about like a 20-year-old. And so that's really important to remember because the expectations that we have for them need to match where they are biologically and neurologically. And that doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just means that we can't expect them to just have it. So an example is I have a lot of college kids I work with who they go off to college and all of a sudden they aren't going to class on time. They're forgetting to do all their papers. They're staying out too late. And the parents are like, but they're 18. They should just be able to do it. And so I think, okay, what if you had sent a 14-year-old to college? What would you expect? And then now, where can we build the tools and the strategies to help bridge that gap for them? So we have to remember that it's not going to be automatic for them necessarily. The other thing to remember is that executive functioning dysfunction builds upon itself. So what I mean by that is if you're chronically late, then you have chronic anxiety because you're always running late. And that anxiety puts you into a fight, flight, or freeze. So you're going to have a hard time being organized or paying attention or problem solving. So if you, without giving like the proper tools and without really helping your kiddo figure out how to solve those root executive functioning challenges, it really is just like this big amorphous challenge that is hard to tackle. So those are some of the big things to remember.
Okay. What role does mindfulness play in managing ADHD with families?
Okay, so I'm also a mindfulness facilitator, and mindfulness is the paying attention to the here and now without judgment. So meditation is part of mindfulness, but it's not all of mindfulness. And it's really about awareness. And ADHD is a deficit of awareness and attention because of the inattention, right? With ADHD, our brains move so fast that we aren't aware of what we're thinking when we're thinking it. We're not aware of what we're feeling when we're feeling it. ADHDers have impulse control issues. So we do things without thinking about the consequences. And then after we go, oh no, why did I do that? And we feel really terrible about it because we're also highly sensitive. So building a mindfulness practice and starting to pay attention to what we're thinking when we're thinking it, what we're feeling when we're feeling it, how our actions, I call it the fast forward remote. So pausing and then thinking about how our actions are going to have consequences, which a neurotypical brain does, but ADHD brains don't, really support then being able to say, okay, now what do I do about it? But as you can imagine, if we don't even know what we're doing and we don't even know how we're feeling and we don't even know what we're thinking, then making any sort of change is pretty much impossible. So some mindfulness tools that we can use are, like I said, one is the fast forward remote. So we practice just being aware of when we're going to make an impulsive decision, just practicing that first. And then we practice pausing. So like taking a deep breath, getting outside, getting a drink of water. And then we start practicing figuring out what the consequences of those actions are going to be. So without that awareness piece, the rest doesn't really come. The rest is really hard. Also, mindfulness has been shown through MRI studies to build the gray matter in the areas of our brain that are responsible for attention and organization and motivation. And so a regular mindfulness practice actually is like going to the gym for your brain, and it strengthens the part of your brain that you really need in order to combat the challenges of ADHD. So it biologically and neurologically changes and creates new connections. The last thing that mindfulness does that I think is really cool is our amygdala is responsible for, in our brain is responsible for our fight, flight, or freeze. So it's someone cuts you off in traffic, your amygdala is responsible for slamming on the brakes and getting really tense and maybe yelling something that you wish you hadn't at someone, right? And so in ADHDers, we have a really overactive amygdala. Our amygdala, it's always looking for danger. It's always looking out for, something that might be embarrassing or something that might be hard. And it puts us into fight, flight, or freeze a lot. And studies have shown that a regular mindfulness practice actually shrinks the amygdala and makes it less reactive. So you can imagine if you aren't always reacting these big reactions and getting put fight, flight, or freeze, you're able to respond more patiently. You're able to pay attention more. You're able to motivate to do things because you're not constantly in that survival mode. So mindfulness is really, really important. And I think it's sometimes overlooked skill when thinking about ADHD, especially in young adults.
That's a lot of stuff. That's good.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about mindfulness.
How do you balance ADHD with parenting and personal obligations?
This is one of the hardest things that parents of young adults deal with. We can parent our ADHD kids 24/7, right? We can support them in everything from getting up on time to doing homework, to making sure they're not staying up all night, to making sure they're eating, to making sure they're taking their meds. The list goes on and on and on, and it's exhausting. But what I tell parents is, it's twofold. One, your personal obligations are essential for you to have boundaries around. They help you stay connected to yourself. They help you make sure that you're not falling behind on all the things that are going to help your family and help those around you. And it is so true that we can't pour from an empty cup. I know that saying is said a lot, or you have to put on your oxygen mask before you can put theirs on, but it's so true. So I've seen a lot of parents that just have devoted their whole lives to their young adult ADHDers, and they feel like shells of themselves. They are resentful, they're frustrated, they're ready to give up on their kiddo. And I think that doesn't serve anyone. So some of the, more practical things that I suggest is making sure that every single day you do something for yourself that is one of your personal obligations. This can be for work. This can be for your home. This can be for yourself. So for instance, you could make sure that you get on a work call uninterrupted and you put your phone on do not disturb. You make sure that you go to the grocery store and you don't take that call from your adult kiddo when they're calling and you say, sorry, I'm at the grocery store. I'll talk to you when I get home. Or you get in your workout. You go to your favorite workout class. Those are examples. So making sure that you are still keeping those boundaries. And how we keep boundaries with ADHDers is we have to be really explicitly clear about them. And we have to hold them tight, because in an ADHD brain, it really is give them an inch and we'll take a mile. We don't do a good job of discerning, oh, this was a one-off, or, oh, I can't really take advantage of this anymore. So if mom says, okay, every time I go to the grocery store, I'm not going to take your call. That's my time to listen to my podcast, do my grocery shopping, and you're not going to call. And then the kiddo calls 3 times and mom says, okay, fine, I'll answer. And it's like, okay, yes, I'll come home and help you with your chemistry homework right now. I'm on my way. Then that kiddo every single time is going to be like, oh, mom's just going to come to my rescue. That's great. And so instead, if you do feel the need to answer, making sure you hold that boundary. You know, I'm so sorry you're struggling with your homework right now. That must feel really frustrating. I'll be home in an hour. I want you to see what you can do in that hour, and then we can check it when I get home. So really holding that boundary and being very clear about it, even when it's pushed, because it's going to be pushed because they're feeling like they need a lot of help. And the flip side of that is to be able to do that, you have to really help them have at least a couple strategies for what to do when you're not available. So, you know, in this instance, okay, you know that you have that study guide that you created that helps you organize your notes. Why don't you use that study guide and fill in all your notes, and then I can help you check it when I. Or, hey, you know that you can make a Quizlet and that really helps you study. Why don't you make the Quizlet while I'm gone, and then I'll check it when I get home, so that they feel they have something to fall back on and feel empowered to do something more individually than just kind of waiting on you.
Sounds like it can be exhausting.
It is exhausting. And I think it's especially exhausting and it's scary for parents of adults, because we all want our adult kids to thrive. We want them to fly. We want them to do their best. And
Right.
it's really scary to watch your kid flounder. It's scary to watch your kid get really anxious or depressed, because that's what often happens. There's some comorbidity with ADHD, and it often happens in young adulthood. You know, speaking to like what I said before about all of a sudden I don't have all those people helping me and doing everything for me, and I don't know how to do it without. So they fail classes. They often drop out of college. They often get evicted because they're not paying their bills. It's really hard as a parent to see that, especially because ADHDers tend to be really, really smart and really intellectually capable. So it's hard to know that as a parent. Like, I have this really smart kid who can do like amazing physics problems, but can't pay their bills. It's hard to wrap your mind around that.
Right.
So it is kind of an all-encompassing thing. And, you know, I have parents that even their kids are in their 30s and they're still helping them just kind of figure out how to be an adult.
Wow. Can you explain the concept of neurodiversity in family context?
Yes. So neurodiversity is an umbrella. What it means is that the brain is wired or structured in a different way than what we consider neurotypical. So under that umbrella is autism spectrum, dyslexia, ADHD, different kinds of auditory processing disorders. So it's considered a medical diagnosis and a mental health diagnosis, but it's considered a medical diagnosis. And what happens often is if one person in the family is neurodiverse, it really affects the whole context and the whole relationship or microcosm of the family, because that person, by definition, doesn't process the world in the same way as everybody else. So if you have, 2 adult kids, let's say, since we're speaking about parenting adults here, and one is neurodiverse and one is not, the one that's not tends to feel like the one that is gets more attention or gets more support or takes all of the attention or takes all the support.
Right.
And that can be really challenging to navigate as a parent, because obviously the one doesn't need it. And so you're like, hey, great, go do your thing. Awesome. So proud of you. And here your sibling needs a lot of my attention, needs a lot of support, needs financial support. And so what I have talked about with families is figuring out, again, those boundaries and figuring out how you can give the same kind of attention and support to the not neurodiverse child of yours so that they still feel your love and attention, because there's a lot of psychological things that we know happen growing up in a family with a neurodiverse child. And one of the big ones is feeling neglected, feeling resentful, and then the parents feeling really, really bad because they look back and they're like, I didn't give that kind of love and attention that I wish I had to my neurotypical kid. So it goes back to that intentionality and really thinking about, how am I showing up for this kid that doesn't really on the surface need me as much? And how am I making sure that this child feels the same kind of attention that I do? Because, again, neurodiverse kids need a lot more support and help. And it can be all encompassing if we don't really step back and make sure that we're trying to balance it.
So are there resources for parents that have like a child that's ADHD? Are there resources or training that those parents can dig into to provide them with having to transition from one child to the next, and one's neurodiverse, the other one's not. And, I can imagine that's a huge challenge.
It is a huge challenge. So the first thing that I would say is there's an organization called CHADD, CHADD. And CHADD is an international ADHD organization that has so many resources that you couldn't even use them all if you wanted to. So that would be the first place that I would go. They have on-demand trainings, they have readings, they have a huge conference every year that many parents of adult kids attend to get support and go to the sessions. So that would be the first place that I would start. The second place that I would go to is finding either a family therapist or a coach like myself who can support you in building family systems, because ADHD affects the entire family. We can't just build a system for this one person and say like, oh, okay, we'll all just go along our way and hopefully you've got it. Really has to be about systems that the whole family kind of buys into so that everyone can be on the same page. And finding a professional that can help you build those can be really, really helpful. The third I would say is, you mentioned Facebook groups, many online Facebook groups for parents of ADHD kids, whether they are 5 or 55. So I would highly recommend finding a group that you can ask questions to, you can bounce ideas off of, so that you don't feel quite so isolated and alone, because it really can feel very isolating, especially if you live in a community or somewhere where all the kids kind of seem like they have it together, and you go to book club and all your friends' adult kids are like thriving and doing great and don't need help. It can feel really shameful and isolating. So finding a group where other people are going through it with you and understand what it feels like can be really helpful.
Right. That's good. So last question, what practical tools help create sustainable systems for family dynamic?
Yes, that's a great question. So the first thing that I would do is I would figure out a calendaring system for your family. Now, what we need to know about ADHDers, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. So you might have your Google Calendar, your family Google Calendar that you've shared with everyone, and you might notice that your adult or young adult child never adds to it, never looks at it, and it's really frustrating. So you're like, I put your appointment on there. So what you need to do is sit down as a family and figure out, and by family, I mean anyone who would be affected by their dysfunction, right? And figure out, okay, what is going to work for you to see it, but it's also going to work for us to be able to easily update it and easily figure it out. So for my family, for instance, I ordered a custom whiteboard that's very large and in our kitchen, and each person has a box for each day, and that's where everybody knows to write. If you have an appointment, if you have a practice, if you have an extra thing you need to go to, it is the hub. And we've just become in the habit that you put it up there. And that's great for us as parents with our older kids, because we can look at it and say like, oh, hey, don't forget you have this dentist appointment on Friday. Do you have a ride there? Do you know how you're going to get there? So it's an easier way for us to kind of have those conversations. So having some sort of hub or some sort of system. There's a calendar, a digital calendar called Skylight that a lot of my clients like to use, because it does just connect to your digital calendar, but it's a big screen that you put up in your house, and it's color coded. So that can be really helpful. The next is to just be really understanding and figure out the communication style of your ADHDer. So some ADHDers, actually a lot of ADHDers have verbal processing disorder as well, which means you might say something like, hey, I need you to go get your book out of your room. And all they hear is book. They physically hear it, but their brain only processes the word book. So they might say something like what or huh, or what about a book? And you have to repeat yourself. And then you might have to repeat yourself again. And so that can get really frustrating. So if you know, okay, my kiddo has verbal processing challenges, you can pause, you can have them look you in the eye, and you could say, I need you to get your book out of your room. What do you need to go get out of your room? And have them say, oh, I need to get my book out of my room. So making that little adjustment, even though that sounds like, oh, I have to do that every time I ask them to do something, it actually in the long run is a lot less frustrating than repeating yourself. Or we have working memory issues. So you might say, even to your adult child, like, I need you to go to your car, get the cups out of your car, get that blanket out of your car, and come in and wash them and put the blanket in the washer. That's a lot of steps. They might only get to your car and get the cups. And then they might put the cups on the counter. And then you'll say, wait, where's the blanket? Wait, why aren't the cups washed? If you know that they have working memory challenges, just writing it down on a sticky note. If you're an ADHD family and you don't have sticky notes all over everywhere, you're doing it wrong. I always say, I wish I had invested in Post-its 30 years ago, because my family goes through them so much. I'm so sorry, planet Earth. But I do that all the time. Just write it on a sticky and be like, here. So then my kid goes out to her car. She looks oh, I need to get the cup. Oh, wait, what else do I need to do? And it's so much better than me going, where's the cups? Where's the blanket? Wait, I thought you were going to do that. And then me getting frustrated, me getting mad. So figuring out their communication. So a calendar system, a communication system, and then also something that I call flexible routines. So something else that happens in an ADHD brain is we tend to be defiant. So ADHDers used to be diagnosed often as also having oppositional defiant disorder. But now we know it's a very rigid thinking, much like kids with autism. And so it can be really hard if you give a kid with ADHD a really strict routine. Like at 7:15, you have to do this. At 7:25, you have to do this. And that's kind of counterproductive, because we're like, no, they need to have that. So instead, I think we have what I call must do and may do menus. So you can even do this if your kid doesn't live with you, right? So every day, what are the things you must do? I must brush my teeth. I must eat breakfast. I must take my medicine. I must get dressed. Then what can you do? Oh, then I can get on my phone, or then I can play that video game, or then I can watch that YouTube, or then I can maybe go get coffee if I have time. And having those must-dos and those may-dos helps you see, okay, these are the things I have to do. I don't have to do them in that order. It doesn't have like a timestamp on it, so I can have that flexibility. But I know these are the things I have to do before I can go to these other things. So it provides that structure without that super rigidity. So those are my three top tips for supporting families that have an ADHD in them.
That's a lot of good information, a lot of practical information. So your Post-it notes are they all different colors?
I used to like to have them all different colors, and then it just became too much. We're too many people. So now it's just whatever we have around us.
I wonder how many colors they actually have. I never thought about that.
I think a lot.
I know they got the bright yellow, they got pink, they got blue.
They have green.
I don't think I've never seen a red one.
I have seen a red one. I have.
You have? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I used to have like a rainbow block, like that was like really tall, and it was like, it definitely had red. Yeah.
I can't remember what the commercial was. Excuse me, but has to do with the pods. You can order a pod, and you like if you're moving pods or whatever. Yeah. There was a person sitting outside on a chair that was just covered in sticky notes, and I can't remember what that was all about. But I was like, that looks retarded. But I mean, they are literally covered in them from head to toe. And then somebody walked up and stuck another one on them, and I don't know what the purpose of that was, but it's really funny looking on TV.
Was it like the person had so much they had to do? Was it like a physical representation of their never ending to-do list that we all feel when we're moving?
The next time I see the commercial, I'll unmute it and listen to it.
Okay. I haven't seen that one.
I think people would make millions if you had a TV that could mute advertisements automatically. I mean, I'd pay extra for that. If my cable company said, okay, for another $25 a month, we can mute all those commercials for you. And I'd be like, sold.
Right.
Where's my wallet? Where's my wallet? I get so tired of it.
And I feel like we use like YouTube TV for our live TV, and the commercials are 10 times louder than the shows.
Oh, I know.
So
I hate that. I hate that.
And then we're like, turn it down. And then the show comes on and you can't hear it. And you turn it up.
I think they do that because they know it's irritating and people will pay attention.
Oh, I think you're probably right.
We're always multitasking, looking at our tablets, looking at our laptops, looking at our phones, having conversations. And so I think they jack up the volume just to get our attention, and it gets my attention. So I hit the mute button. I'm like, mute. Then my wife's always telling me, honey, the show's back on. I'm like, because I'm looking at my laptop working on something, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, the show's back on. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'll turn it back on. It's crazy.
It is. That's funny. Well, you'll have to look at the Post-it, whatever the man in the Post-its next time, and figure out what it's for.
I will. All right, Corie, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today. You've absolutely given us a lot of wonderful, practical solutions for everyday use that we can use with our ADHD kids. And I appreciate how you talked about the family dynamics and how it affects everybody in the family. And so that's all wonderful stuff. And I look forward to this episode coming out. And I absolutely believe that the listening audience will get a lot out of this. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Yeah. I really appreciate it.
So to my listening audience, I want to say thank you for the privilege of your time. And I'm changing my podcast up in that I don't do the outro that I normally do, because I have found out through analytics that a lot of people don't even listen all the way through. So I'm going through this huge spiel at the end of the podcast episode of where you can listen, what you can do, you go to my website, all of this information. I spent, 3 minutes at the end of the podcast episode giving the people that information to come to find out most people are not even getting that. So now what I've done is I've done a call to action, a little short video at the very beginning after the intro. Then I put that little call to action video in there and gives people the information that they need. Then I say, and now on to our regularly scheduled program. Right. So now to get to the episode, they got to listen to the call to action. Now that doesn't mean that they don't mute me, or it doesn't mean that they don't fast forward through it. But hopefully a certain percentage of people will listen to that and go, oh, wow, he's got a website, or, oh, wow, I can leave a review, or, oh, wow, this is the information the website will give me, And so anyway, I'm trying that now. So instead of doing the outro, I can just sit here and babble about silly stuff.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Make it easier everybody. For everyone.
Yes. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Please tune in next week for another episode of our podcast on parenting adult children.